Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to this event every year because it's really an opportunity to spend a couple of days with leaders in higher education. I particularly want to thank the trustees and the regents who have been here because, of course, your work is service, and we really appreciate it. We wouldn't be able to make the gains that we do make in higher education without your active participation and leadership. I also welcome all the university and college officials that are here, and we know how busy your schedules are, and we know that it's a significant commitment of time to come here and talk about where we are in higher education. I will do what I always do on these occasions, and that is I talk about where we are, closing the gaps, and where we have to go. And then I want to spend a little bit of time at the end of my presentations talking about some of the tough challenges. One of the premises of my remarks this afternoon will be that we've done all the easy things. And we've made some progress in some areas, not as much as any of us would like. But if we're going to make the kinds of changes, if we're going to respond to the kinds of issues that Paul Tough talked about this morning, we're going to have to do things dramatically differently. And those are some of the challenges that I'd like to talk to you about. Let me first start off by talking about where we are in closing the gaps, and because some of you were here yesterday and this morning, I'll go over some of these data points very, very quickly. First of all of you know that we launched this initiative in 2000 with a completion date of 2015, 4 major components: participation or access, success, student success, and then research and excellence. I think everybody would agree that the 2 most important goals, the first 2 among equals, are student participation and student success. And on those 2 particular issues, we have a lot of good news. First of all, if you look at this first slide, you'll see that we need just 34,000 additional students to reach our 2015 target. Our enrollments have been declining recently, and there are a lot of reasons for that. You know those issues as well as I do, so I won't go into them. But we have every expectation that we will hit our targets. And I can tell you that when I was offered this position, and I was sitting in my office in California and talked to a lot of my California friends about coming home to Texas, they looked at, I said, take a look at this higher education plan in Texas that the coordinating board has primary authority for achieving. And what I was told by friend after friend, and these are mostly leaders in higher education in California, they said, don't do it. You're going to be a fall guy. Texas will never achieve those goals. And here we are. We're within reach of achieving the very ambitious goal of increasing enrollments by 630,000. If you look at the next slide, yes. A round of applause for yourselves. You're the ones that are getting this done. Now, within that context, we have some challenges. This slide shows that we've had a decrease in white enrollment. That's largely attributable to the demographics of Texas, and the white population as a share of the overall population of the state is decreasing. But we also had a decline in Hispanic enrollment, and that isn't consistent with demographic trends. That's an issue that we have to take a look at. If you look at the next slide, you see that we are well short of our goal in terms of enrolling African American students as well as Hispanic enrollments, although they have increased dramatically. I say over and over again that one of our challenges, we keep coming up with wonderful arithmetic solutions to geometric challenges. But we've made incredible progress. We just haven't kept pace with population growth. If you look at the issue of males, This is the area where there is great reason for concern. If you look at the enrollment of African American males, it's way below where we need to be. And it is not too much to say, as some people are very worried about this. We're worried about the decrease of African American males relative to African American women, because one of the interesting things about this pattern is that African American women participate in higher education in Texas more than any other group. And the irony is, if these numbers for African American males don't increase dramatically, we're likely to get to what people consider a tipping point where African American males will see themselves present in such small numbers that then we'll see a precipitous decline in the enrollment of African American males. What I've just said about African American males applies even more dramatically and even more seriously to Hispanic males. Notice the level of enrollment. Our target for all groups is a minimum of 5.9% participation in higher education. And for Hispanic males, it's 4.1. Notice it's significantly lower than the participation level for African American males. We've made a lot of progress, but you can see that our participation rates are still way below where they need to be. The phrase I keep using over and over again is that we're doing better, but we're not getting better fast enough. And this shows that relative to the 10 largest states in the country, we're still way behind in levels of participation. We've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. If you look at undergraduate credentials awarded, this is the best part of our story. If somebody were to ask me, well, you may not be able to achieve all 4 goals equally, which one would you pick is the most important? And the one, and I think most of you would agree, the most important goal to me is actual completion. And here we've already exceeded our 2015 goal in terms of completions. Undergraduate credentials awarded. That means certificates, associate's degrees, and baccalaureates. We have seen extraordinary progress among African Americans and Latinos. However, once again, if you look at the enrollment numbers, these numbers disproportionately represent achievement by women. Women are the ones that are acquiring the bulk of the degrees. Men participate, African American men, Hispanic men participate at much lower levels, and they complete their programs at much lower levels. So this is a story of achievement among African American women and Hispanic women. We have seen credentials increase by 213% for Hispanics. I don't think any state in the country can match this record. But once again, in terms of the increase in the overall population, we're behind. We continue to lag behind in STEM. And all of you know the reason for that. The simple fact of the matter is that the reason we're so far behind in STEM graduates is that our high schools in Texas are not producing enough high school graduates who can do rigorous STEM work. We've looked at data and we know that there are plenty of students who declare STEM as a major when they initially arrive on a college or university campus who would fill the need for STEM majors, but they don't complete those STEM degrees. The only way we're ever going to achieve our STEM goals is we're going to have to get higher education and public education to work more closely together to increase rigor in STEM courses in high school and to align those courses with college preparation. If we don't do that, we'll never reach our goals. The other two goals, very quickly, I'll run by those very quickly. We have surpassed in dollar terms the amount of money we wanted to achieve in terms of research expenditures. That's half the story. The other half of the story, in terms of achieving the overall percentage of federal research expenditures that Texas receives, we haven't achieved our goal. That's a result of a number of factors, including a decline in federal support for research. There's some other factors at play, but we've got a story that I prefer to characterize as being half full. We reached our monetary goal. In terms of excellence, there's no doubt, which we didn't define very precisely, so it's rather a nebulous term, but we're doing very well in this regard. In terms of universities, it's very clear that, for example, the University of Texas at Austin is now regarded generally as being one of the top 10 public universities in the country. Texas A&M University has made some spectacular gains in terms of its overall academic excellence. The only part of the U.S. News and World Report rankings that I look at with any sort of concern or I should say of any sort of regard, are the rankings for graduate programs. And the reason I take those seriously is because they're based pretty much on peer reputation or peer evaluation. And if you look at those, those rankings, you can see that in the latest rankings, UT San Antonio is represented, UT Dallas is represented, the University of North Texas is represented, Texas Women's University is represented, the University of Houston is represented, and Texas Tech are all represented. And 4 or 5 years ago, that was not the case. So that shows an increasing quality in the excellence of our universities. In the Washington Monthly's rankings, which I will talk about a bit more in a moment, Texas A&M was ranked 3rd. And UTEP was ranked 7th best in the country, right in between Harvard and Stanford. In terms of our two-year institutions, I can tell you that over the past 2 or 3 years, it's been a remarkable acceleration in terms of excellence in this particular area. Texas community colleges have become the national leaders in student success. And Texas community colleges have been particularly the leaders in addressing issues related to developmental education. We've started to implement all over the state all kinds of innovative approaches, such as modular or intensive courses that are not necessarily a semester long. We've started to undertake much more holistic advising so that we can evaluate the whole person and not just the academic performance of the student. We're developing co-requisite courses so that we place as many students as possible in credit-bearing courses, even though they might require remediation in 1 or 2 areas. And we're also leading the nation in blending reading and writing into one course. I know as an English professor that the way English courses work is you read a text and you write about the text. That's the way the courses work. So it makes no cognitive sense to separate reading and writing into 2 distinct courses. I'll talk a little bit about what the technical colleges are doing in just a moment. We've come a long way in Texas public education since 2000, but we still have a long way to go. If you look at college readiness, you can see that we've gone up dramatically. I think probably the most important factor in college readiness was the development of the recommended high school program as a default curriculum in Texas. And it was very clear that once that particular curriculum kicked into place, we started seeing significant increases in college readiness. You'll notice that we've made significant improvement for African Americans and Hispanics. We still have a long way to go. If you look at the next slide, I'll tell you which one. Hold that one for a second so people can see it. Next slide. You can see that once again we've made significant progress, but if you put things in context, we still have a long way to go. If you look at ACT scores, and I believe it's this last year, Judy, is this accurate, that for the first time last year there were more students, high school seniors in Texas, taking the ACT than the SAT? So that's the reason we're using this figure. We've made significant progress over the past 5, 6, 10 years. But look where we are. We're still well behind, right in the middle of the pack in terms of college readiness, and we're well behind states like California, Virginia, Massachusetts, in terms of the number of our high school seniors that are college ready across the board. I should tell you that the numbers for SAT are even more troubling. We rank 47th in SAT reading scores, and we rank 43rd in math scores. Clearly, if we're going to achieve our state educational goals, K through 12 in higher education must work much more closely together. We need to do a better job of preparing teachers, identifying high-achieving students and encouraging to become teachers, particularly at the secondary level and particularly in fields like math and science. We need to take more responsibility for working directly with teachers that are already in place. The teachers that we train pre-service are a drop in the bucket compared to the teachers that we could help perform at higher levels who are already in the schools. And I urge every institution of higher education in Texas, both community colleges and universities, to develop strong programs of professional support for in-service teachers. This past session, we had a significant change in the way we're going to do the high school curriculum in Texas. House Bill 5 passed, and its intention was to provide high schools, provide school districts, provide students and their families more options in what they wanted to study with some kind of career or post-secondary goal in mind. It's a laudable goal. I applaud the idea of giving students and their families as many options as possible. But House Bill 5 presents a huge challenge when you think of what we have to do in the context of the fact that we have a ratio of over 400 students for every high school counselor in the state. The genius of the recommended high school program is you had to opt out of it. By definition, students were taking a college and career-ready curriculum. Now, we are going to have to upgrade significantly the amount of advising we do to make sure that students are prepared. I point out that one salient point in understanding the magnitude of the challenge, the average educational attainment of an adult Hispanic in Texas over 25 is about 10 years of education. And now we are in a situation where those parents with a 10th grade education are going to have to make tough decisions along with their children about which courses to take. 5 endorsements, all very different. They're going to have to make these choices by and large by the 9th grade. The danger, as a lot of educators have pointed out, is that high schools will do what they've done historically when this kind of curricular process was in place, and that is that poor kids get tracked into less rigorous, the non-college going tracks. Affluent kids have the resources, have the information to make sure that they're taking rigorous courses that prepare them for post-secondary education. We are going to have to find ways to make sure that we give students the right information. And it is in every one of our interests. It's in our enlightened self-interest to work with high schools to try to improve advising, making sure that students and their families have the right information about which choices to take. Virtually every institution of higher education in Texas has outreach activities. As part of your outreach activities, I urge you to inform students about the complexity of House Bill 5 and why it's important to pick the right pathway, the right endorsement for whatever their interests are. I think that we are going to, we're going to have a couple of years where it's going to take us, we're going to have trouble putting into place the different kinds of mechanisms we need to provide students and their families the right information. One of the particular strategies that have been developed at the coordinating board is this program, Advise Texas. This program was developed as a kind of analog in advising to Teach for America. And what this program does, it's a national program. We've got more participating institutions, both colleges and universities and high schools in Texas than any other state. We've gone from 15 counselors, advisors 4 years ago to 125. And the goal of this program is to place near-peer advisors in low-producing high schools in Texas and make sure that students and their families get the correct information about pathways to post-secondary success, whether community colleges, technical colleges, or universities, whether you're interested in academic pathways or CTE pathways. These students are trained to provide the right information to students so that they get a good fit for what they want to do post-secondary. We are going to have to, as I said, we're going to have to do things very differently. We're going to have to do much better by poor students because in Texas, poor students constitute the majority of students in K through 12. 60% of students in our public K through 12 system are defined as being poor by one metric or another. And we have to make sure that they have the same range of opportunities that, that other children do. So one of the big challenges we have in Texas for all of us in this room is to make sure we do our part to make House Bill 5 work. Let me move to something that's exclusively in our realm, and that is student success. There was a recent document that was published by the National Commission in Higher Educational Attainment. The subtitle is College Completion Must Be Our Priority. I would have modified that phrase and I would have written that, that college completion with high quality credentials must be our highest priority. Let me tell you, some of these recommendations have already been adopted around the state, but we need to do a better job still. Here's the first of the recommendations in this report, and I urge all of you to read it. It's a very short document, but it's filled with good information. Number one, develop a student-centered culture. One of the most, I think one of the most thoughtful observers of higher education is William Massey, who is a retired professor of education and business at Stanford, and he also served for many years as the vice president for business affairs at Stanford. And he has said in a number of articles that we went off the rails in higher education when we went from being a student-centered culture to a faculty-centered culture. And the manifestations of that are clear everywhere. For example, all of us hear all the time that the undergraduate curriculum in higher education is a mess, particularly at the lower division level. Why is it like that? Well, the main reason it's like that, or certainly one of the main reasons, is because professors teach what they want to. And because professors know that, particularly in public institutions, that you have to have a basic enrollment in your courses for them to be offered, they've been very clever about making sure that their courses count towards fulfilling requirements in certain areas. The result has been curricular chaos in a lot of cases. And we know from a lot of different studies, mostly by behavioral economists, who tell you that the more choices that students have, the more confused they get. And that confusion retards progress toward completion. I'll talk more about that in just a moment. That's just one area. We need to go back to being student-centered. And every member of the faculty needs to understand that his or her major responsibility is effective teaching, advising of students to help them towards graduation. The second major component of this commission recommendation is we need to teach the teachers. I often say that there are two great myths that have caused us a lot of trouble in higher education, and one of them is, by virtue of getting an advanced degree, you know how to teach. We have a lot of professional development programs for faculty in higher education. Invariably, they're voluntary, and invariably, most faculty don't go. We have to make sure that we have mechanisms on every one of our campuses to assure that our professors are working at a basic level of competence. One of the, in offering this recommendation, this report recognizes the professional development work at Richland College, and we actually had that program featured at a coordinating board meeting. So if those of you that are thinking about doing something like this, you don't have to go any further than Richland College to see an example of a wonderful program that helps faculty become much more effective in the classroom. The third recommendation from this report is encourage competency-based instruction, competency-based learning. If it doesn't take you 15 weeks to master a body of information, why force a student to sit there that long? This approach is particularly valuable, I think, in graduate programs. I think of all the doctoral programs, I'm sure there are people sitting in this room who would agree with this, that if you've been working as a professional educator, as a principal, as an assistant principal, as a classroom teacher for 10 or 15 years, you might not need a required 30 hours of coursework before you're advanced to candidacy. Competency-based instruction is something that we should develop. We're already doing it at institutions in Texas like Western Governors University, but we can do a lot more. And then, once again, getting back to the first recommendation, narrow student choices. Pare down the curriculum. Make it more coherent. Make it less confusing. And make sure that it's geared to help students succeed. Not only academically, a strong, coherent curriculum will have embedded in it marketable skills so that students can get employment after college. It will have embedded in the curriculum those kinds of soft skills or character skills or non-cognitive skills that Paul Tough talked about this morning. Another document very quickly that I want to mention to you, I hope that you will look at, is called the Game Changers. This is a document that was produced by Complete College America, which is an organization to which Texas belongs, and their entire focus is accelerating college completion. And this document, which I urge all of you to read, is based on a simple proposition. We've done a lot of things in higher education to improve student achievement, and virtually all of them have worked incrementally. If you look at the portrait, a snapshot of higher education in this country over the past 40 years, you'll see that access, particularly by poor, underachieving students, has grown sharply at about a 45-degree angle. If you look at the completion rate for those same students, it's relatively flat. And we've had any number of scholars who've pointed out that part of what is happening in this country is a growing gap between the affluent, the haves, and the have-nots. And higher education is exacerbating that gap, not closing it. And we have to do things differently. And this document targets 4 or 5 strategies that have been demonstrated in any number of sites, not to change or not to improve student achievement by 1 or 2 percentage points a year or every 2 or 3 years, but 10, 12, 14, 15% increases in student retention and success year to year. And that's why they're called game changers. The first one, performance funding. I won't talk about that because we talked about it plenty in Texas. We adopted it in this last legislative session for 2-year institutions, mostly because of the enthusiastic support for performance-based funding from those 2-year college leaders, and we applaud you for that. We are going to work on university performance-based funding. We're going to come up with the metrics that will be acceptable to everybody this time around. Right, David? Well, yeah, I'm gonna get to that in just a moment. This is an example of one of the strategies that's recommended in this document. Game changers, co-requisite courses, making sure that you place students in credit-bearing courses as much as possible, that you use a band of college readiness indicators rather than cut scores, so that if somebody is just below a cut score, you can place somebody in a credit-bearing course, you can place somebody in a strong tutoring program to make sure that they get the kind of support they need in order to pass the credit-bearing course. You pair courses. There are a lot of different approaches to this strategy, but they are absolutely essential. We've already got some early evidence where they've been adopted around the state. This is one particular model of the program or of this strategy that has worked. Please inform yourselves about it as you develop these kinds of strategies at your own campuses. The next one, full-time, is 15 credits or 15 hours a semester. We have to find ways to get more students to attend full-time. The evidence is ample that part-time students, as soon as a student goes from being full-time to part-time, his or her chances of completing a credential decrease by more than half. We have to think about restructuring financial aid. This is a national issue, not just a Texas issue. We have to impose a policy of flat rate tuition so that students don't pay any more for taking 15 or 18 hours than they do for what is now defined as a full load, which is 12 hours. I'd be happy to modify this notion of full-time is 15 credits to say full-time is completing 30 hours a year. And that gives us some flexibility for students to take courses during the summer. But 30 hours a year, we have to strive to achieve that standard. Next, we have to look at structured schedules and guided pathways. Once again, this gets to the point that Paul Tough made this morning. Poor kids, kids who haven't been terribly successful in high school, students who are coming back to college after having been out of the educational system for a long time, do not typically do well on their own. They need a lot of help. And the tragedy of American higher education is we know this. And I don't like to reduce everything to moral issues, but there really is a fundamental moral issue when we admit students to our institutions, knowing that they fit particular profiles that suggest they will need an awful lot of academic support to succeed and not provide it to them. We have an example of a program that does provide the structure, does provide the guided pathways, does provide an accelerated model. The Fast Start program at Texas State, the Texas State colleges, technical colleges. We are watching this program closely. It's very important that it succeed. We have every reason to believe that it will. Chancellor Reeser over there is nodding his head, and I think this will be a model for what we can do all over the state. And I think we can look at the Tennessee model where programs have been condensed, particularly in CTE fields, so that we can put people to work as quickly as possible. When people can see light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not a terribly long tunnel, they're much more likely to succeed. I think that these are some strategies that we all know about. If you look at the Texas Affordable Baccalaureate Program, once again, this is an attempt to make college affordable and to give you a structured pathway. This is not likely to be, the $10,000 baccalaureate is not likely to be a program that's available at every university or community college or in every discipline in every part of the state. They will be highly structured programs that are available at particular institutions in particular fields where it's relatively simpler to structure them in a way that's appealing to students. We've also noticed, for example, that community colleges that offer block scheduling so that students know from semester to semester that they will be going to school in a particular major from 8 until 12, or 1 until 5, or 6 until 10 in the evening, that their rates of retention success go way up, not marginally, dramatically. Those are the kinds of initiatives that we have to adopt in this country. We have a lot of challenges in Texas that we have yet to address, and I want to finish by talking about those. Here are, for me, the most important issues. I've already covered this first one to some extent. It's part of becoming a student-centered once again in higher education, but we have to improve and we have to measure student learning. That book, Academically Adrift, which many of you are familiar with, it came out several years ago, that found that 35% of students in higher education have learned virtually nothing after 2 years in college, and about a third of students after 4 years in higher education have learned relatively little, so little that it's hard to measure learning gains. That's unacceptable. We have to make sure that we improve student learning in particular ways. I talked about this. I talked about the chaos that is present in so much of the college curriculum today. In Texas, we try to address that issue in certain ways by requiring certain courses in American history, American government. It's unthinkable, which is less the case in Texas, but it's common in other parts of the country, that students can graduate from college and know nothing about the Constitution. Students who can't distinguish between the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and can't even mention 2 or 3 components of the Bill of Rights. We've got to improve student learning, then we have to measure it. It doesn't, we've got some tools. I know that the University of Texas uses the Collegiate Learning Assessment. That's one tool. There are others. We can use capstone courses. We can use student portfolios, but we have to be able to tell what students are learning. We have to be able to validate that students are benefiting from getting a college education, particularly as costs go up. We have to do a better job, and as Paul Tuff made clear this morning, we have to do a better job of teaching and strengthening the entire student, not just the intellectual part of the student. You can't do one without the other. The other big myth that I talk about that gets us, that I say gets us in a lot of trouble in our education, is the myth that and this applies more to universities and community colleges because of the different demographics, but the myth that in that period between graduating from high school and landing on a college campus, a student is magically transformed into an adult. We've got to provide the help our students need to become successful. I know that community colleges have been, in Texas, have been developing these student success courses. That's not a bad idea. It's a good idea, but a better idea is to embed those student success elements into every introductory course on a college campus. All faculty should be adept at embedding those skills in regular credit-bearing courses. And if they don't have those skills, that's why we need those professional development programs to make sure that every faculty member gets them. We need to develop a new criteria for institutional excellence. I mentioned a moment ago the Washington Monthly rankings, which I consider to be a significant step in the right direction. They're based on 3 criteria. And there are subsets of these criteria, but these are the 3 criteria. How well an institution does in help closing the gap between the haves and the have-nots in this country. How well they do in recruiting, enrolling poor kids, and then actually helping them graduate. The second criterion is fairly standard. Research productivity, developing graduate students in highly needed fields, doing research and, that really counts towards the public good. And finally, the third criterion is how well an institution trains its graduates, its students, and later its graduates, to have a sense of civic commitment and involvement, and ultimately participation. That we train our young people to commit themselves to public service, volunteer work, being voters, getting involved and contributing once again to the public good. And I think that we've got to move away from this overemphasis on research and look at the ways that we serve the people, particularly as public institutions of higher education. Finally, this last, and probably I saved it for last because it's probably the most difficult. We have to revise the tenure and the promotion system, particularly in universities. Virtually every faculty handbook in this country says that faculty will be evaluated on the basis of contributions in 3 areas: research, teaching, and service. And we place much more greater emphasis on research. And when we say research, we really mean publications, because all faculty, good faculty, stay up with their fields and do research, but they may not publish. But we place an over-reliance on research because it's the easiest one to measure. What we need to do is we need to pay attention to effective teaching. And our criterion, the one indispensable criterion for advancement in an institution of higher education, should be superior intellectual achievement. And if you can demonstrate superior intellectual achievement by working with a local high school, local school district, and dramatically improving the number of students who are graduating from the high school or an array of high schools well prepared to do STEM work, that should count towards tenure and promotion. If you're an effective teacher in the classroom and you have a much higher retention rate and your students graduate at much higher levels, that should be an effective criterion for promotion. You know, every study of reform in higher education always ends with the same caveat. We've got to get the faculty to support us. Faculty will support us if they are rewarded for doing the things we want them to do. How many people in this room can cite the example of a faculty member who says, you know, I really want to get involved in helping the local high schools do better work in certain areas, but I'm going to get dinged when I come up for tenure or when I want to be promoted because it doesn't count. It should count. And we're not going to make the major advances that we need unless it counts. Over the next couple of years, we're going to be spending a lot of time developing the new higher education strategic plan for Texas. We hope that most of you will get involved and provide your input about what our goals should be. We've come a long ways, but we've got a very long way to go. And I want to end by making the claim that study of the Game Changers does, and that is, we've done all the easy stuff. And if we're going to make any dramatic improvement from here on out, we're going to have to engage the issues that were on the previous slide. Thank you very much.